Welcome back to Sex Crimes Defense Podcast with Chance and Jay. Chance Oberstein is a criminal defense attorney in California. I'm a media professional. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and it's not intended to be used as legal advice. Chance, what are we talking about today?
Well, I think today we're going to speak about Cesar Chavez because he's in the news. He's topical. And I think that his case is a good illustration of something that underlies almost every single case we talk about. But this is underlined in a more dramatic way. So maybe we should start off with explaining who he is because people may not know who he is. Do you know who he is? I mean, you're just a kid. What do you know about Cesar Chavez?
And I'm going to say Cesar Chavez, if that's okay, right?
That's okay.
That's how I pronounce the name. All right, so you're right. All I knew about Cesar Chavez was that he was a Hispanic workers' rights advocate. I knew that he was, a big name, maybe a big personality too. That's really all I knew, but it seemed like, he had done a lot of good.
Okay. Well, he did do a lot of good. This is a man who was born in 1927, and by 1993, he was gone. But he was an American labor leader and civil rights activist, best known for co-founding the United Farm Workers Union. Okay, but I just say the United Farm Workers. That's really how they're known. The UFW. And the nation, it was the nation's first successful farm workers union. He devoted his life to improving wages, working conditions, labor rights for agricultural workers, and many of whom were Mexican American and Filipino. So in essence, he was a pioneering labor organizer, a champion of farm worker rights, and an important figure in the broader civil rights movement. That is who he was. Does that ring a bell?
It does, and I think it's because we already kind of know where we're headed, and anybody listening, please do comment, like, share, subscribe. But this is a tricky one, which I think is why you chose this topic. This is an important topic to cover.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think what we're talking about here is not him in the flesh because he's gone. But what we're talking about is what was his legacy and how does it stand now? What is his legacy? Well, supporters regard him as one of America's most important labor and civil rights leaders. His legacy includes a federal commemoration known as Cesar Chavez Day in several states. Numerous schools, parks, and streets are named after him. And his continued advocacy for farm workers' rights by the UFW. Okay, so you might want to ask then, what crimes did he commit? What crimes did he commit? Has he committed any crimes during his lifetime? Did he?
Well, and I want to take this moment. God knows how many streets were named after him, officially named after him, schools officially named after him, parks officially named after him, statues. A day, a national day? I don't know if it's global, but I mean, you're talking serious accolades here. There are not many people. We have many, and we've torn down a lot of statues in this country, but that's a lot. It would be like trying to change Martin Luther King Day, parks, schools, statues. That's the level we're at here on his legacy.
That's true. I mean, even I live just off of his street. And I say his street because it once was named Reagan, and then it's Cesar Chavez.
Right. I mean,
in a suburb in East Los Angeles. I mean, it all changed. It all changed, and it was something that everybody felt so good about. But the question is, what crimes did he commit? Because, if there were any very serious crimes committed, why would then we celebrate him? So let's start from the beginning. There is no credible evidence that he was charged with or ever convicted of any serious crimes such as murder, fraud, or other major criminal offenses. However, his career was highly contentious. After all, he was a labor union leader, and he has been accused or associated with conduct that critics describe as unlawful or say abusive. So here are the principal things that were alleged. Violence during the farm workers' strike. I mean, he publicly advocated nonviolence for much of his career. However, critics and some former supporters have alleged that members of the United Farm Workers engaged in acts such as assaulting strikebreakers, vandalizing property, intimidating workers who chose not to join the strikes. But whether he personally directed or approved those particular incidents remains disputed. Historians differ on the extent of his responsibility, such as these other things. Well, let's just take them one at a time. Secondary boycott activities, trespassing and civil disobedience. And what I mean by that is trespassing, failure to disperse, and other misdemeanor violations connected to protests. Treatment of undocumented workers. One of the most controversial episodes involved in the UFW's efforts to prevent undocumented workers from being used as strikebreakers. Think about that. During the 70s, union members participated in what has become known as the wet line, attempting to stop undocumented workers from crossing into strike areas. Critics alleged intimidation, harassment, and occasional violence. He was criticized for these policies, although the historical record varies regarding his personal involvement in specific incidents. That's what I'm talking about. Things like that, things like internal union criticism and, that type of thing. They're all allegations about leadership style and organizational management rather than criminal conduct. So the answer is, what crimes did he commit? 0.
Well, and nothing you listed is beyond anything the January 6th rioters did in the Capitol building. And
well, it's really different in that way, because everybody, well, let's put it this way. Everybody who is alleged to have been involved with that is still standing today. So, there has been a lot of investigations. There's been a lot of corroboration of evidence of this or that. Again, this is about leadership style, not crimes committed during a potential coup, and organizational management rather than criminal conduct, which we saw as people attacked the Capitol. Surely, from our standpoint, from just watching them, were criminal. And it was during an attempted coup, it appears, but he wasn't involved in things like that.
right.
The allegations about him were just leadership style, about his leadership style and organizational management. He did not direct criminal conduct, at least not to the level that would have been prosecuted and tried in a court of law. So, the question is, from my standpoint, and I'm looking, let's just say that was a long time ago. It's a lot of time has gone by. How did you perceive him? What do you perceive of him, short of the allegations that are current?
Right. Well, I want to say that in researching about him, he witnessed a lot during his childhood. He was subject to a lot. So I wonder if later violence, intimidation, trespassing comes up, we are products of our environment. And if him and other advocates, organizers engaged in some of the tactics that they experienced in their struggle for civil rights, I think you could also look at other civil rights organizations and make a similar analogy of, if you learn, hey, you're getting beat up, you're finally making some headway. Well, you might do a little beating up here and there, maybe.
Yeah, but surely if he did anything that was,
And I'm not, we don't know him, the group, whoever.
Right. There's always going to be, an ebb and flow of
and again,
those
January
who support.
6th, we've
Right.
learned you can do these things now. The president's cool with it.
Well, that's a whole different conversation. But
You're right.
When you're thinking about him, and you're thinking about civil rights, and you're thinking about who he represented and how vulnerable they were in terms of labor and labor issues, this was a classic American struggle. Okay, whether you say
Correct.
he did this or whether you
Yes.
say he did that, it never resulted in something serious enough to go to court over. How's that? And determine whether or not there was truth to any allegation. His whole entire life. So we're bringing that now up to speed. Okay, now we're here. Okay, what is in controversy today? What makes it? Why is this after his death? What is going on today that's causing controversy? That's the issue.
Well, it is the issue, but you also, before we move in there, I just want to add this too, is that you're almost talking, I don't want to invoke slavery, but farm workers are not, there are many people and groups that don't think of farm workers as part of society, but rather a subclass that just needs to do what they're told. And that is what he was fighting against. I mean, that is a giant thing to fight against. I mean, you can imagine the frustration and the tears and sweat of him and those around him.
Well, him and his organization, the UFW, organized nationwide consumer boycotts against table grapes and lettuce. Come on, man. Some employers and courts allege that certain boycott tactics violated labor laws governing secondary boycotts and picketing. These were generally civil labor law disputes involving the union rather than criminal prosecutions of him personally. So that's what we're really talking about here. I mean, all trespassing, failure to disperse, those types of things. These arrests arose from acts of civil disobedience rather than allegations of violent crime, which is, I think, what you're trying to point out, which was a movement, right?
And civil disobedience, it's interesting that we're talking about that, because for a minute, civil disobedience is now a regular thing. People engage in civil disobedience because they don't like the flight attendant.
Right. But here, here, one of the most controversial episodes involved the UFW's efforts to prevent undocumented workers from being used as strikebreakers.
And here
imagine?
we are. So here we're also at the intersection of ICE, which we're still grappling with. You have a large section of the country that thinks ICE they can't do wrong. You can shoot protesters and it's fine.
Yeah. And so here, there was a division, and former union officials and biographers have alleged that he consolidated personal control over the union, purged dissenting leaders, and relied heavily on loyalty rather than democratic governance. We're talking about a union, okay, that protects workers. So, these allegations are about leadership style and organizational management. What we have to get to then, what we really have to understand is what's in controversy today.
So, here's what we need to do, I think. Let's talk about allegations, and then we're going to take a brief break for part 2. You want to do that? You want to?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
What is being alleged that's causing us here at Sex Crimes Defense Podcast to talk about Cesar Chavez?
Yeah, why in the world are we taking a closer look? Why should we be doing that?
We've spent 15 minutes talking about what seems to be a great man. And here we are at Sex Crimes Defense Podcast talking about this guy. Why are we doing that?
Well, because as of 2026, there's been serious posthumous allegations of sexual abuse against him, Cesar Chavez, because he died in 1993, so there are no current criminal charges or prosecutions, and the allegations have not been tested in court. And they stem primarily from a multi-year journalistic investigation published in March of 2026, which wasn't that long ago.
It's June
And
right now. June 20. That was 3 months ago.
Right, and subsequent to public statements. So here is the allegations. The allegations are rape and sexual assault. Dolores Huerta, his longtime colleague and co-founder of the United Farm Workers, publicly alleges that he raped her in the 60s and described another sexual encounter that she said was coerced. She stated that both incidents resulted in her pregnancies. And then there's the sexual abuse of minors. 2 women alleged that he repeatedly sexually abused them when they were adolescent girls during the 70s while he was leading the UFW. And then there's this grooming and abuse of young women and girls. News reports summarizing the investigation, and I'm talking about a journalistic investigation, state that multiple women accused him of exploiting his position of authority to groom and sexually abuse girls and young women associated with the farm workers movement. Okay, and that came out of The Guardian. It was between PBS and The Guardian, all these things come up.
So here's what oftentimes when I'm listening to something, I think of an analogy, and here's the analogy I just thought of. And I hadn't thought this until you just said that. If we were to go back in history, all the way back to the pharaohs, supreme leaders in Asian territories, I mean, there's a lot of dudes to cancel. I mean, Genghis Khan might be.
Let's be more simplistic than that. But we're talking about taking each thing in context. In the context of their day, it was something else. In the context of our day, we always take the context of our day as a layer and we lay it on everything else and define what was going on there by how we understand things today.
But these allegations don't have context. This is one of my primary beliefs, is that we don't apply context to anything anymore.
Well, they may not have context, and they may be unproven and untested, but they have had significant impact on the public. I mean, this is the UFW canceled its participation in the 2026 Cesar Chavez Day events and stated that allegations involving abuse of young women and minors are deeply troubling. And the Cesar Chavez Foundation acknowledged the allegations and announced efforts to support anyone who may have been harmed. And several governments and institutions canceled celebrations or considered renaming streets, schools, and holidays honoring him. I mean, that's what's come out of these allegations.
So stick around for part 2, where we continue this important conversation about Cesar Chavez. You've been listening to Sex Crimes Defense Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us on part 1. Be sure to listen to part 2.